All right, welcome back to another episode of EventHubs Talking Block. I am John Catalyst Green. With me as always is John Velociraptor Guerrero.
Hello. Street Fighter 6 has grown in its roster size and has added Ed just about a week ago. We go today, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got our mind on DLC, and we know that Akuma is coming next, probably in 3 or 4 months. But since we know that, the kind of places our minds are going, especially since we recently did videos on Akuma here, are what's in store in the future. It's not that Ed's not super exciting and interesting, but yeah. And
no, he
so,
definitely is a case that he's not super exciting or interesting.
well, he's better than he's ever been. I'll say that, and I think he's got some more juice in Street Fighter 6. And great, cool. We're messing with Ed, but I also want to look into the future and kind of start to guess and talk about what Street Fighter characters would be good as DLC.
People are going to be salty about our picks, but that comes with the territory. So let us know what your picks are in the comments, because we know that's coming. So.
Right on. All right, so who did you have first?
I've got M. Bison first, and this is something that I thought a lot about. Which of the 4 Shadowloo Kings should come back? And I think Bison in a new body is really the most ideal because he's the most popular of those 4. He's one of the most iconic Street Fighter characters, and seeing how he looks in a new body and how they're able to bring him back would be very interesting, if you ask me. Bison never stays dead. He's died plenty. He's like Jason from Friday the 13th. You've killed him a bunch, but he's still going to come back. He's going to teleport on you. If his moveset comes back from Street Fighter 5, it won't be a problem with parries with this game. With the way the game works, like in Street Fighter 5, you had to hold a lot of stuff that Bison did, but if you got parries and drive impact in this, I don't think Bison's going to be quite the nuisance he was in the prior game. But John, what do you think about Bison?
First and foremost, outside of gameplay, people love the character, and for good reason. I'm actually working on a Bison video right now. He's always going to be a good addition to a Street Fighter roster, and I think a lot of people will fork over cash for him, so he definitely checks that box. What's more, in the recent introduction of Ed into Street Fighter 6, they also brought a new stage, the Ruined Lab, which Capcom loves doing. There's Ruined Labs in just about every Street Fighter game. This Ruined Lab has, it's clearly a Shadowloo lab, as it has the Shadowloo emblem on it, and then on the floor, and then it's got a bunch of like what look like Seth clone bodies, and then in the middle there's a giant golden one, and we actually have a story where someone took a modded camera and looked more specifically at that one, and you can see that these bodies are all twitching and they're alive. There's also the M. Bison hat sitting right in the middle of the stage on a throne, and I think is it whenever Ed wins, the hat floats up a little bit with psycho power. So a bunch of little breadcrumbs there of the potential of like we're setting up this big main golden body in the middle could be our M. Bison, and that makes me think about how often the Capcom will put certain characters into the backgrounds of stages, right? But then if you're playing as those characters, this happens with Guile on his stage in SF6, but it also famously happened with Bison, Balrog, and Vega in the Air Force stage in Street Fighter 4, where they'll appear in the background, but if you're playing as them, then they're not there anymore. So I could see if they eventually brought M. Bison in and you play as him on that stage, his hat wouldn't be there, of course, and maybe the tank in the back is broken and that body is gone, something like that. But those pieces are in place should Capcom want to go that direction, and I feel like Capcom is a fan of money, so Bison wouldn't be a bad call.
I do have one case against Bison, even though I just made the case for him, and that's he just died. He just died a little bit ago, and maybe it's good to keep him dead for maybe season 3 or something like that, but it's Bison. It doesn't feel like Street Fighter without Bison, if you ask me. Like, he needs to come back. If they're going to pick one of the other Shadowloo Kings, I would go personally for Vega over Sagat and Balrog. I think Vega really fits the game a lot as well. He's one of my honorable mentions, but the thing about it is I want to see what Shadowloo has been up to this entire time. They got destroyed. Fong is trying to bring them back. You've got all this stuff going on. Like what is going to happen? And it's going to be the Street Fighter explanation of what happened. So it's not going to be satisfying. You're not going to really enjoy it, but at least you're going to get some clues of what's happening. Why is JP the accountant? What is he doing now? Is he hacking some? Is he hacking JP Morgan and stuff like that to buy some more money so he can buy another body? What is happening here? We need to know.
Well, and you were getting into gameplay a little bit. I have to think about that, because do we have any characters like Bison or Vega that kind of have they're not super jumps, but Vega goes off the wall and does a bunch of acrobatics, and Bison can also sort of do the same with his Devil's Reverse, right? So these characters sort of fly about the screen in ways that most others don't. Does Street Fighter 6 have a character like that right now? And would that be conducive to the game's flow with the drive system?
not quite like that. Like Kimberly would be the closest like high mobility character, but not like Vega and Bison. The mobility there, and especially with how important quarter control is in this game, you might see some really nice stuff from Bison and Vega if they're included in the roster.
Yeah, and then how do those sweeps work with Drive Rush? That's kind of scary to think about too. But I don't say that they shouldn't come. All right, well, I'm talking about Bison. I don't really care about Vega at this point. But also Bison's on my list as well. I think Bison would be a really good pick. He has been so central to the game's story. The story is not super important, and he's been written out for, I guess 2 games worth now of lore if we're going chronologically. So, but all that to be said, so many things either are incited by Bison, characters are motivated by Bison, Bison's putting on tournaments. He's been part of this lore and story for so long, and to see him come back, it would just be like welcoming back a family member, an evil dictator family member that wants to sow seeds of chaos and division, but family.
Family, yes, definitely. Well, we might have some family like that. But moving on, the next character I've got is GRQ. And the big question is if this is GRQ depends on what has happened in the timeline, because G might literally have become Q at this time, or maybe there's a bunch of Qs, or however this works. They're highly related characters, basically, so either one. However, getting some clarity on the events that happened after Street Fighter V would be really nice to hear. We don't know very much about what has happened in the world since Street Fighter V has ended. G was supposed to destroy the Earth and the universe, and Rose was somehow supposed to stop him. And Q is some kind of murdering revenge force. And finally getting some details on this long time mystery would be awesome. This dates back to nearly 25 years ago.
Yep, Street
Almost
Fighter 3.
25, yes. We have been waiting that long to find out more about Q and tying that to G and all this other kind of stuff. This would be so much fun to finally unpack. And again, it's going to be the Street Fighter version of it, so it's going to be not very satisfying, but at least there's going to be some clues, some things in there.
G is absolutely also on my list. Q is not. It's not that I wouldn't like to see Q, but, I did a video on this as well, exploring the relationship between the two, and I think it's the most interesting story thread that's currently in Street Fighter right now. But yes, You're right. And at the end of SF5, it was apocalyptic, but that's not how G put it. G was always talking about it in the sense of unity and bringing things together and Pangea, which I love the symbolism that they mess with it. They go the extra mile to make things symbolic, and that makes them a little more broad, and you can play with them a little more and what the meanings are and such, and how other characters and other philosophies and themes might bounce off of them. I don't think that G becomes Q, but I'm not going to reveal what I think the answer is. You'll have to watch the video. I want to see G come back specifically, though, because I'm much more interested in seeing the process or the evolution from one point to another. Either things go terrible for the rest of everybody, or Rose does her thing and fixes stuff, but we get to glimpse into what would have happened. It sounds like multiple timelines here. So there's so much there, and they brought it all up at the end of SF5 and then nothing. I did not like, by the way, G's design as far as I didn't like fighting him in Street Fighter V. Well, I don't think anyone liked fighting him early on. They did, regulate him a little bit down and such, but he was a very snowball all or nothing V-trigger character. That said, I do have some faith in Capcom's balancing team, despite what they just did to JP, but that's another video. I do have faith because they've done so much in the way of showing that they're aware of all the moving parts with Street Fighter 6 that I think that they could bring back characters like G, and there's another one on here that I really didn't like the way they functioned, the way she functioned, but I think that they could do a good job of bringing in the personality and the moves and balancing them appropriately. And hey, G was bombastic. He was cool to watch, whether you liked it. He wasn't cool to fight. He was cool to watch. He's a good esports character. He's got a lot of charisma. I think people would buy G, no problem. So yeah, I think he checks a lot of boxes, and maybe we would get the story. Or maybe it would be something like G found Q's hat on the ground and is trying to return it to him, and that's the whole story between the two of them. That's the connection, something like that. So
that sounds like what Capcom would do. Yeah, please don't do that, Capcom. That's not a suggestion.
That would be, at this point, that would be plagiarism, because I came up with it first. So you're going to have to find find a better story.
Yes, please find a better story than that. I do think that G would fit Street Fighter 6's overall style of play very well. The core mechanics in this game really do lend themselves to being able to counter that YOLO stuff we saw so heavily in Street Fighter 5. And I do prefer G over Q. And please bring back Christopher Corey Smith, who did the voice acting for G, and he did that awesome speech at EVO. His lines were great. He's just a great voice actor for that character. And G, to me, has so much more personality than Q does. Q's, the mystery character. So I really prefer to have G come back. And really like that suggestion.
All right, I got one. I got one to throw on the list here. Dudley. And before you say, but Ed is already the boxer, and Ed does have flicker and some clearly inspired by some of Dudley's design, I don't think Ed and Dudley play very similarly at all. Dudley is a rushdown character. He's very explosive. Ed tends to zone. Ed tends to space control. So you can have both. You can have more than one boxer in a game. They've even had people think that if there's one version of something or something that's too close to another thing, then that box is checked. Well, I say look no further than Urien and Gil in Street Fighter V. Urien got Gil's costume as a Halloween costume a couple of years into the game, and then Gil joined in. But people were saying that cancels the possibility of Gil out. And then, Dudley and Balrog were both in Street Fighter 4. I think there's plenty of room, and I think Dudley would be an awesome character. Again, in this offense-heavy, maneuver-heavy game where the whole thing is pouncing forward, Dudley would be a matter-of-fact top tier unless they were super careful with him. But even then, as I think about that, would it be terrible if Dudley were one of the strongest characters in a game? He's got a lot of charisma, and nobody wants just a broken game, but if he were a top 3 character, that would be interesting to me, and I think his general style lends itself to this game in such a way that he could be. So he's got the charisma. I think people would get him. It's been a minute since we've had Dudley, all the way back since Street Fighter 4. People talk about him all the time. Let's do it. Let's do Dudley. What do you guys think? Dudley? Yeah, see, they agree with me. What do you think about Dudley?
Well, I actually love Dudley as well, and that's why I was so disappointed with Ed's announcement. That one of my big things about the list is I want to see multiple gameplay archetypes represented early on, so that if you want to play a certain style, you have that option available to you. And Ed checks the box for a boxer, which is really important. And of all the boxers to choose, I would have definitely preferred someone besides Ed. I definitely would have preferred Dudley. But now that we have Ed, now that he's locked in, that's the biggest case against Dudley that I have. We've seen him before in Third Strike. You asked me, what would it be like if he's a top tier character? He's top 5 in that game, and pretty much he was universally very well liked, because a lot of high skill, a lot of technicality for him. Yes, him and Ed are definitely different characters and have some different moves, but there's enough overlap there that I worry that Capcom's not going to add Dudley anytime soon, because we just added a boxer character, we don't need another one. That would be my biggest case against him. But in terms of my favorite boxers in Street Fighter, Dudley's number 1. I love Dudley. Dream King plays him. A bunch of other people play him. Man, he's a hype character to watch. I really enjoy him as just a fundamental character, and that Gil stole his car and that he enters the tournament to get his car back. That is so ridiculous. That's so awesome.
He's one of those characters that doesn't have the deepest of stories, and usually that plays out to but Dudley, he's got such a charm to him that it doesn't matter. And the whole Jaguar thing, he's high class, and it's a little deeper than it might look at first, but it's a lot of fun, and he's a lot of fun to watch, and he's got all, like I say, the charisma, and I think he's a lot of fun to play. And can you imagine smug Dudley combos with Drive Rush and Street Fighter 6 mechanics?
It's sweet. Yeah, get that roast toss in there, do all that kind of stuff. So much fun with him. This is the guy who drinks his tea with his boxing gloves on. That is so awesome. So yeah, that's why I was so disappointed with Ed, because I really felt like it kind of eliminated Dudley, but I would not be sad even slightly to see Dudley in the game fairly soon. I think he's going to be a little later down the road if we get him. That's the only knock I've got against him. So
fair enough. Who you got next?
All right, well, no shocker here. I've got Rose. And speaking of styles that are not represented very well in Street Fighter 6, mid-range zoning is actually not very common in this game. You've got pretty much one character right now who does that in Chun-Li. Ryu is traditionally known as a mid-range zoner, but they've pretty much made him rush down right now. And so an archetype that should be represented very soon, because mid-range zoning is a very common style in Street Fighter, not in right now in Street Fighter 6. And I think you've got to get one more character in there. Rose is very popular among the fans. She's tied to Bison, G, all these other other stuff, she's very central to a lot of characters in the plot. We'd also get updates on Oro and Manat, who's a big-time fan favorite, along with Guy, potentially because her and Rose are, I should say, he and Rose and Guy have a little bit of a thing going on. So interesting plot details. Her move set from Street Fighter V was excellent. They really adapted the character to a modern thing. She was extremely well received, and she is a tournament level character. This is not a DLC character who completely goes under the radar. You're going to see big time players using this character in tournament and playing with her. So I think that she is a wonderful fit for Street Fighter 6 at this moment in time, because this gameplay style is very heavily underrepresented, and it's a very popular gameplay style that a lot of people want to use.
As I think about Rose, whom I'm obviously not as excited for, it'd be fine, she's not one of my picks. But as I think about her, and as you were kind of alluding to there, she tends to be heavily tied into the story, right? Because she's very tied to M. Bison. In the last game, she talked a lot about M. Bison, but he gets killed, and then she's all about G, she's interacting with Oro and Manat. I feel like Rose tends to be tethered to storylines with characters that are really not in the game yet. I feel like almost a couple of the characters that we just talked about would have to join first for them to do their classic Rose thing. But I don't know how much she stands on her own, and she doesn't have to. It's just story. Who cares about that in Street Fighter, right?
We do, but yes.
Yeah. But I mean, she does have some cool moves, some flashy stuff. I have never liked fighting against her. I guess I usually play characters that have a hard time with her, for what that's worth. So sure, not my cup of tea, but what do you guys think about Rose? They probably agree with me mostly, but that's fine, you know?
Yeah, she tends to be one of the official EventHubs characters that, half of our staff plays, which is kind of hilarious. So it's like everyone's got a pocket Rose. Of course, my favorite character. I'd love to see her back in the game, but there it is. So who you got next, John?
Well, then I will do a little bit of my own personal preference. I don't think. Well, let me just throw it out there. How about Goken? How about Goken? Ryu and Ken's master. He was dead for most of the lore, but then they were like, you know what? Well, I want to try him out, and they put him in Street Fighter 6 or Street Fighter 4. Said he was just sleeping. He was in a coma, and he's tied to so many characters in some very interesting ways. He's got some really cool, or his status is really cool as like a kind of grandmaster, but also the yin to Akuma's yang, because he's his brother and they have a history, and it's like, I would love to see them clash. I would love to see what is it like with Ryu and Goken now that Ryu has all but like reached Goken's level. And indeed, I think that the developers noted that Ryu's his like sash thing is Goken's, or it's supposed to represent that he's like Goken now. So I mean, maybe that's the argument that now that we have Ryu like this, you can't have Goken. But I mean, you totally could. As far as a play style, he's got some Shoto moves, but they don't really work like the Shotos. His Tatsu is his DP. He's got Fireball Wars that's really fun to do, you know, the high lows. I see a little bit of that in Ed with his, horizontal, medium, and high Psycho Snatcher. Is that what it is? And that mind game, man, I'd really like to go back to playing that kind of a game. So I played a lot of Goken back in Street Fighter 4 and got to play in tournaments and whatnot. And people would come up to me and say, I love this character. Nobody plays him, and I don't understand why no one played him, because he did have a charisma to him. As far as I can see, he should have been resonating more with people, but he just wasn't. But I see in comments all the time how cool Goken was, how much they enjoyed seeing people that like really spent the time with the character, understanding him, play him. Maybe he wasn't appealing at first, and you really need to put the hours in, so people just didn't get to that level with him. But I think lore-wise, playstyle-wise, charisma-wise, he's got all of those things, and I would buy him 3 times. If you're worried about sales, I'll do a couple of them, Capcom, but it would be really cool to bring Goken back, in my opinion.
Yeah, now I love Goken as well. Great character. I really think why he didn't take off is people expected him to be a very traditional Shoto, and he very much was not. Very much kind of like a long-range zoning, throw fireballs, do your mix-ups and stuff from there. I do think that style is somewhat represented already in this game with, Dalsum, Guile. They even have Ed as like not a long-range zoner, but a long-range kind of character. I think that would be the biggest knock against Goken is like, why add him when you can add Sagat? However, I do love Goken quite a bit. He does add to the lore of stuff. Is he still alive at this point in time? Like, it's quite a bit older. How much older is it gonna? Can he kind of like take maybe Oro's spot again? Is Oro dead now? Like, what is all that kind of stuff? But but there's some fun stuff they can do with the character. Watching you play in tournament, watching other people use them like that, it would be fun to see Gouken again. I like the character quite a bit, so I think it's a great pick.
Hell yeah.
All right. Next up, I've got Urien. Urien has become a pretty large fan favorite now, especially with how dominant he was in large parts of Street Fighter V and, of course, Street Fighter 3.
Wait, you feel like people liked him? I feel like people liked playing him because he was a dick and he was really good, but I don't know if people liked him.
Well, he's a villain. He's one of those characters that you see pop up there, and you're generally happy if he loses. He has that, the handshake, the headbutts, all that kind of stuff. A lot of hype with him. He is a very much a very hype character in terms of like his combos when you're doing those crazy Aegis reflectors, like, and all that other stuff, and those headbutt combos. Generally, people get very hype about that. And once again, he is a character we are more than likely going to see in the tournament circuit, which I think is a big deal. He's not a DLC character that's going to come out and no one plays. People are going to play this fighter, and we can get an update on what has happened with the Illuminati, all from Urien's berserk point of view. This guy is half crazy because Gil does everything better. He's second fiddle to Gil on everything and tries so much to...
He's so Kane to Gil's Abel, not to be confused with Abel the character, but which is cool, but not cool enough for me to say that he should come back. I hate this. I don't hate the character, and I didn't play against him in the days of Street Fighter 3 because it wasn't around, or I wasn't playing actively when that game was the main one, and then nobody plays him anymore apparently when I do play Third Strike. But playing him in Street Fighter V, he had so many frustrating abilities, whether it were his normals in Season 2, his ridiculous specials with the headbutt. Remember the knee drop that was basically its own little mix-up, and if you blocked it, that just meant he was plus in your face? Cool. Let's do Drive Rush into that. Or, and then of course the Aegis situations, which in Season 2, he was one of the big three characters that just had V-Trigger robbery written all over him. So yeah, a little PTSD from that version of Urien. Could they bring him back and do a better job balancing him so that he's both entertaining and fair? Sure, but let's give it another game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the hype that he brings and the energy he brings is worthwhile. I get that he's very divisive among the fan base, but there's still enough people who play him and love this character that I think he's worth bringing in, especially in a game with parries and drive impacts that can negate stuff like that, the knee drops and stuff. That's how come Urien was fairly well balanced in Third Strike, is because you had the parry system. You could get around that stuff if you knew what you were doing. All that stuff is back, so I don't think that Urien would be as much of a nuisance as he was in 5. And then again, we get to hear what happens with Gil, Colleen, and the rest of the Illuminati. That is a big thing, because we're in that timeline now, a little past it now with Street Fighter 6, finding out what has happened with that crew. We get that with Urien, hopefully. At least we get some form of that. But I do have an option select here that if people aren't super fond of Urien, there's another option that's close by, and that would be Colleen. Colleen is also a very cool character, and was very popular in tournament and stuff like that. And so I do think that if Capcom does not want to go the route of Urien, they can bring Colleen in instead. Not Gil. Gil is I like Gil and everything like that, but he doesn't bring the hype like these other two characters have. They were far more popular, far more interesting. So Gil looks great, but he's not all that interesting. So I would either say Colleen or Urien, but my preference is for Urien.
I guess between those two, I would say Urien too. No. Yeah. Also, one last question on that. Do you prefer business suit Urien or banana hammock Urien?
I prefer that he comes out in the business suit burns off, and then there's the banana hammock. That is the true Third Strike intro that he has. Yeah.
Oh, so banana hammock with theatrics. Gotcha.
Yes, exactly. The theatrics are so important in this. So do a spin-a-rooney or do whatever and stuff that fits
in
with,
the banana
with Urien.
Hammock.
And then
Interesting. I extra don't want Urien in Street Fighter 6. Okay, next. My last one, actually, is a character that was in Street Fighter 4. I didn't like her, but I think it's time because it's been a game and people love her, and her name is C. Viper. This is weird because 2014 John is mad at me and making mean tweets about me right now.
Yes.
But she was kind of weird. She was more of a Marvel versus Capcom character in Street Fighter, and because of that, she wasn't necessarily flocked to because people were like, I don't know, this is very technical, very different, and I want to just kind of throw fireballs and do uppercuts. I don't want to do feints and fake super jumps and all this crazy stuff that she did. But I think she brings the hype. Like, I can't deny that. And she's, she's a beautiful, attractive character, and she does electricity, she does fire, she does rocket shoes. Like, it's pretty cool stuff that she can get going, especially if you consider, well, what does that look like with Drive Rush and such? So I think that if they balance her, and they could, then I balance her like where she's just outside of the top 5. Like, alluring enough to play, you can win with her. And well, I'd say one of the top 5 characters in this game, because the top 5 in this game is like 10 or 15 characters long at this point. So if she's in that group, but not in the top 3, and not arguably in the top 3, because that's too much for a character like Viper, who's too different, in my opinion, then I think that she could be a good addition that people would enjoy playing, some would enjoy playing, a lot would enjoy watching. And I mean, she was in the storyline for Street Fighter V in the pre-stories, and people were like, she was one of those, oh, there's Viper, that maybe she's coming, and there was people that were hype about that. And so I think she would do well as DLC. I wouldn't mind seeing her again until she starts playing and destroying me from all. But a lot of what was crazy about her was the left-right mix-ups, and parry gets rid of a lot of that. So hey, maybe even right there, that's kind of an answer to what made Viper a little bit too much. So what do you think about Viper?
I like the pick overall. Shouts to Latif, Wolfcrone, all the people who put in that time with her. Highly technical character. Was either considered one of the most technical characters in Street Fighter 4, or the most. And that level of technicality and needing to unlock that is super impressive in tournament. When you're seeing the super jump cancel combos, the feint cancel combos, that player has put in a ton of time, effort, and energy to unlock that stuff. And that adds so much hype and so much energy to a game when they're hitting multiple one-frame links and multiple just crazy combos to get that extra damage. It's so wonderful. Viper is a character fully capable, and it's so respected in that regard. That's what I like about her. A lot of flash, a lot of energy, and again, I agree with you that the parry mechanic basically makes some of her most frustrating stuff not as difficult to deal with. So I would have her a little further down the list, but I would not be upset even slightly to see Viper added into the game. I think it's a good time to have her back. She was very hype in Marvel as well. Marvel 3, she was a very common character at high levels of play. We saw her a ton in 4. It's a good time to bring her back.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Would you like to see Viper?
10 points!
And so I've got one honorable mention here. My other honorable mentions were Vega and Colleen, which we covered. I've got Makoto. Because Makoto is very high up there on the popularity list. And she is one of the... Because, okay, so when the developers were working on Street Fighter 3, one of the biggest complaints that they saw was that the game was too boring and not explosive enough.
So they put the most plain Jane character. She wears a karate gi, and she has those powers, and she does karate.
But she can one-shot you. She can one-shot you, and that is...
Is that why we're bringing her into Street Fighter 6? Hey, Marissa, move over. We got a one-touch.
Yeah, so this is either the biggest robbery character in the entire franchise, or one of them.
You're not making your case stronger.
Well, this is why she's an honorable mention and did not make my list, is because of that reason. Is like, ooh, and then I was looking through the roster in terms of like explosive characters that we have. We've got Cammy, Kimberly, Jury, DJ already. We don't badly need this robbery style represented. As you're hearing here from Velociraptor, he is not a big fan of robbery. However, this is a character that traditionally brings the fireworks and other stuff, and she's very popular among a certain sect of people. So I could not mention Makoto, even though I don't think she should be added yet. I think there's going to come a point in time where it makes sense to add someone like Makoto, who's just hardcore robbery, hardcore crazy. That does add hype to a game, especially when Street Fighter 6 evolves to the point of, like people are so fundamentally footsie based and doing perfect parries and all this other kind of stuff that the game slows down a lot. It's going to make a lot more sense to add Makoto at that point in time. So she's an honorable mention for maybe season 3, season 4, somewhere a little further on down the road. Yeah.
Just, I know that she was hype in moments. I remember watching Haitani play her. I think it was like at an Evo or something, and just people go crazy because she zips up to you, and then she's in your face, and then you've got a strike command grab mix-up, and when she lands the command grab, it goes into craziness. And I do agree that she is bombastic and fireworks when she hits you, and in her style, she's juggling you around, and she's hitting hard, and it's all these like visceral chops and kicks, and so yeah, but we've talked about her even in Street Fighter V, how she just her style is not very conducive to balanced Street Fighter play. She zips up to you and puts you in a mix-up, and if it goes her way in the iteration in Street Fighter 3, and she had the meter and she was close enough to the other wall, she could kill you with one command grab. It's like that's not a great spot on your resume. I mean, it's memorable. It was exciting, I guess, but it also is not a great spot on your resume. So I hear you. I could see it. Maybe it would be good, but it's not on my list. So there's that. Yeah.
That's how come Makoto was not added to 5. Is 5 was bombastic and explosive enough that they got too many complaints about the game being too much that way. Adding Makoto would have just made it even worse. So I think it makes sense to add Makoto into Street Fighter 6 when the game slows down to the point where people are like, we need something more explosive. We need something a little bit more dynamic here. Sure. That's when I would like to see the character added in. Until then, I just wanted to keep her as an honorable mention because she's so popular. There are a lot of people who enjoy the character. But there it is. And the last thing I wanted to bring up here, John, is so we saw 4 characters this first season of Street Fighter 6. Do you think that Capcom should add one more character in there, or maybe even 2 more characters for season 2 and get up to like 5 or 6 per season?
So that's interesting because there's pros and cons to both. The con is that this game can be pretty, I don't want to say convoluted, it's dense, and it's a lot to learn how a new character comes in. And that said, I feel like the characters that have come in thus far, we've got 3 of them, and Ed's still very fresh, but even there's been a lot of hype, and they've done a good job with them. I don't think any of them have been real duds. Aki has had maybe the least splash, but she's got that kind of weird poison style that they're still trying to figure out how to really incorporate correctly. And even then, she's got some interesting stuff. So yeah, I guess maybe I don't want to go to 6. Mm-hmm. I guess I'd be okay with 5 because I'm used to that from Street Fighter 5, and that felt like a decent sort of pace there. And but I like it for the sake that the game sort of evolves and updates. I also don't like it for the sake that the game sort of evolves and updates. So I wouldn't be super sad to see 4 more. At the same time, 5 feels like you're getting a little bit more. What is that? Communication and engagement and game as a service, although you're paying for each one of those, right? So it's not a hill I would die on, but if they went to 5, I think that people would see that as a little good faith. A little like Capcom is giving us a little more. That said, if they do a really good job on 4 characters, I'm down with that too.
Yeah, it's I would go back to Aki on the if they're going to do a really good job of 4 characters, and then somewhat Ed as well, that you're always going to have some characters in here who don't have that major impact, that just oh man, I'm so happy that they're included. It's hard to keep up that momentum, and one of the ways you can do that is by speeding up the release windows a little bit with these characters. And I think that going from 4 to 5 would be better because there's a little less gaps in terms of hype and energy that's coming from the community, because you've got a new character a little bit more often, and especially with a roster as small as it is, compared to what Ultra Street Fighter 4 was, and if you in Street Fighter 5, it would be nice to get them a little more caught up. And so I would really like to see 5 characters per season. I think 6 is probably a bridge too far with the development effort and all that other kind of stuff. Harada was talking about this with Tekken, like how many resources, how much time it is. Street Fighter 6 was in development for 5 years, what we heard, and like Aki's eyebrows, like in the latest video, like they're like the developer was doing like a hair by hair tweak of Aki's eyebrows, and it took him a while and stuff. So I think, what did they say? Like her Fireball took like 5 months of development time alone. So I get that this stuff is very time consuming, very hard to do. So, but I do think that they could get one more character in there, and it would just kind of, it would help grease the wheels here a little bit in terms of the game having a little bit more expansive and dynamic of a roster.
Well, I'd love to hear what the people think on that front, as well as, a list of 4 or 5 characters that you think that would be good for DLC, either your own personal wish list or one that you think strategically would be good for Capcom and for the game. Either way, just let us know. John, did you have anything else you wanted to say?
That's everything.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in the next one.